In the broad flower beds, over the dead-headed irises, surges a magical and astonishing wave of poppies, an extraordinary mingling of tones, an orgy of pale tones, a magnificent confusion of white, pink, yellow, and mauve, an incredible lineation of blonde flesh tones against which orange shades dazzle. Glowing coppers trumpet their fanfares, red bleed and flame, violets cheer, and deep purples blaze. This is an extract of a long poem written by the 19th century author Octave Mirbeau, inspired by this magical place I'd like to introduce you today. Much like this poem, this site I'm inviting you to stroll in this video has inspired thousands of artists over the past century. For the occasion of the 150-year anniversary of the Impressionist movement in art, we are exploring one of its emblems, a world of senses, of colors and memories. This is a living canvas which perdures 100 years after its creator's passing, forever changing with the seasons, rendering immortal life to its artist and founder.
Hi guys! We're filming from a very special place today, one of the most beautiful gardens in the Paris region. This garden was created by one of the most famous artists of the 19th and 20th century. Yes, you have guessed it, we are in the beautiful gardens made by Monet, one of the most famous French painters. We are very privileged to film here today, and we're going to take you on a little stroll through history around his life and explaining a little bit of his legacy. So please, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, and let's get started.
Welcome to the world of Claude Monet. For over 40 years, Giverny was his home, his site of creation, and his masterpiece. This enchanting place, filled with vibrant colors and rich memories, offers you a glimpse into the artist's life. Located about an hour by car from Paris, visitors of Giverny can explore the house where Monet and his family lived, the studio where he created his iconic works of art, and his remarkable collection of Japanese prints, which I will discuss further later in the video. However, Monet's house is especially famous for its two gardens, which he created himself. With a passion for gardening as well as for colors, he conceived both his flower gardens and water gardens as living artworks. The gardens are composed of the Clos Normand style house with its flower beds and the water garden planted with oriental vegetation and weeping willows. The two gardens tell the story of the evolution of Monet's artistic vision and of his work. Monet first moved to Giverny in 1883, at the half point of his life. He stumbled upon the country farmhouse on one of the country walks that he enjoyed, exploring the beauty of the countryside, looking for inspiration for his paintings. Monet fell in love with the house at first sight, as well as the village around it. The move to Giverny was very hard, as it took place partly by boat and gave Monet endless clothes for complaint. However, Monet was very proud of his house, having built his own legend in his lifetime. Monet once said, "I bought the house, and little by little I enlarged it. My drawing room was originally the barn. In the garden we all sat to. I would dig, plant, and hoe, and in the evening the children would water. As things improved, so I expanded. One day I managed to cross the road and start work on the garden." Monet loved to point out that Giverny was before anything his own creation, made with the labor of his own hands. At Giverny, Monet and his wife Alice raised a happy family that was surprisingly unconventional for its time. After the death of his first wife, Monet and his 4 kids moved in with his new partner and her 4 kids. Today, this would be called an extended family, but it was highly unconventional for the time they lived in. Monet and Alice married in 1892, and together they raised 8 kids in this microcosm composed of a beautiful house and 2 artistic gardens. The first to be planted was the one you see on the screen, referred to as the Clos Normand. This garden, planted right in front of his house, was to provide numerous subjects for his paintings. The second garden, the Japanese-inspired water garden, is planted with oriental vegetation and weeping willows. It is characterized by its Japanese bridge, which is painted green, that overlooks Waterlilies in the pond underneath. Monet built this pond by diverting a branch of the river Epte. Here, art went beyond imitating nature. Nature was instead molded by Monet to create art. Monet said about this pond, "It took me a while to understand my water lilies. I had planted them for pleasure. I grew them without thinking of painting them. You don't absorb a landscape in a single day. Then, suddenly I had a revelation, and I saw all the enchantments of my pond. I took up my palette. Since then, I've hardly painted anything else." This pond inspired Monet's final paintings, the monumental water lilies. The paintings were so large that Monet built a separate building at Giverny called the Waterlilies Studio, where the museum's gift shop stands today. Monet created this space to isolate himself from the horrors of the First World War. Monet explained, "I wanted to shut myself away on my own, to lose myself in work, so as not to think any more about all the horrors being committed so relentlessly. I lived there for 5 or 6 years, hardly putting my brush down." With the water lilies, Monet wanted to create a work of art that was utterly new and that no other artist had done in the past. Sadly, Monet passed away before he could complete his work. The series of water lily paintings were bequeathed by Monet to France at the time of his death. They were first unveiled to the public in 1927 and, unfortunately, received very little success. Only 50 people turned up for the viewing. It's only after the Second World War that the paintings were rediscovered and began to be appreciated for their artistic significance. Today, they are on display at the Orangery Museum in Paris in an exhibition standing outside both time and space. While he was a warm and welcoming host, Monet could also be discouraging to visitors. Monet was famous for having a bit of a fleeting temper. One of his guests recalls, "Sometimes when his painting would not come as he wanted it to, he would get angry, and I saw him fly into terrible rages." Monet didn't allow his children's friends into his gardens, and even forbade them from addressing the flowers in familiar language. The relationship between Monet and his neighbors in the village was tense. They were scared that the exotic vegetation that he planted in his water garden would poison their own crops. The villagers did not welcome the Monet family among them, and Monet did nothing to encourage them to visit his property either. Nevertheless, Monet welcomed several prestigious guests over the years at Giverny. Among these guests were his personal friends like the painter Auguste Renoir, the writer Octave Mirbeau, whose poem I read at the beginning of this video, Princess Matsukata of Japan, and then French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau, who he was close friends with. Monet died in 1926 leaving the house to the care of his children. Towards the end of his life in 1966, Monet's son, Michel, decided to bequeath the property in Giverny to the Académie des Beaux-Arts. By gifting the family house, Michel was seeking to safeguard memories of his father and to create a place that could be visited by his admirers. Even during the artist's lifetime, more than 30 years prior, fans of Monet were making pilgrimages to Giverny from as far as the United States and Japan. Now, decades after his death, Monet's artistic reputation was to live on for generations and inspire new generations of artists. When it was donated, the property had been left empty for decades, and all that remained of the gardens was rough grass infested with weeds. The lily pond had turned into a bog. The house and its gardens were to undergo extensive restoration. However, as there were no surviving plants from the time it was created to serve as references for an identical reconstruction of the garden, the restoration would prove to be an arduous task. Records of seed orders found in the archives, as well as Monet's own paintings of the gardens, were thus used as the basis to give Giverny back its splendor of yore. The key to its restoration and to its maintenance to this day lies in viewing Giverny as a work of art in its own right rather than a faithful replica. It is with this idea in mind that the house and its gardens underwent extensive restoration before it was inaugurated to the public in 1980 as a museum. Today, the garden offers multiple vantage points, forever changing with the seasons, an ever-changing world echoing a succession of moving images, much like the paintings hung inside his house. Finally, it's hard to talk about Monet without talking about Japan. Upon visiting Giverny, visitors are immediately surprised at his large collection of Japanese prints hanging on the walls all around the house, which he was very proud of. Monet was an avid fan of Japanese prints, which he used as inspiration for his own art. The similarities between Hokusai's Sazai Pavilion of the Temple of the 500 Rakan, for example, which Monet owned, and his own painting Garden at Sainte-Adresse are well documented. Monet was a big fan of Japan and had numerous fans in Japan. Monet once said, "I have many admirers in Japan, you know. They often come here and sometimes they pay me the delightful compliment of bringing their wives with them dressed in traditional Japanese costume. How magnificent their robes are." On one occasion, a car carrying these precious creatures rolled off the road near Bonnières. We had to go and gather up the ladies. Well, those Japanese visitors weren't the least surprised to find my house lined with their prints. And when I said to them in front of my paintings, "It won't mean much to you, I suppose," they replied, "More than you might imagine. Your art is so far removed from that of our masters." Unfortunately, Monet never made it to Japan in his lifetime. However, decades after Monet's death, the architect who renovated Giverny and his Japanese friends had a dream: opening a copy of Giverny in Japan in memory of the special connection between the artist and Japan. Although the architect was unable to oversee the project himself, a copy of the House of Giverny and the garden was opened in 1999 in the spa town of Kitagawa. So, if you ever visit Japan and you're a fan of Monet's art, make sure to visit this magical place. Today, Monet's memory lives on in opposite ends of the world, in France and in Japan, both magical places paying tribute to the artist's life.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these travel insights and this little stroll through history around the life and history of Monet and his legacy, one of the greatest painters of the 19th and 20th century. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. And don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified whenever I post a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.